Can you hear me? I just said hello. That's all.
Oh, hello, Charles. Yes, we
We
can.
didn't hear you before, but we do now.
Perfect. All right, so let's get this thing rolling. Welcome, everybody, to the Virtual Brown Bag of April 15th of 2021. As usual, we run through a quick intro here just to let folks know what these meetings are about. We do record them. We do encourage folks to share, open up their mics and just share their thoughts and, screen and whatever it is. So whatever it is that you are sharing, just make sure that you're not going to share something that's going to cause you any kind of trouble, right? Because we do record these so that folks can later watch it, rewatch it, whatever the case might be. And we don't really have time to edit things out later. Um, so just bear in mind those facts. What is the virtual brown bag thingy? It's a place where we get together, we share tips and tricks. It could be tools that you use that make you really productive and you feel like other people should know. Maybe you have shortcuts that you use all the time and you see folks not using those. Well, maybe it's because they don't know. So, just share those things, articles or books that have enticed, your thought process. Bring it up and let's have a discussion about it. Maybe experiences, something you've learned the hard way. You can do even better if you share those with others. It's going to help you internalize your lessons learned the hard way, and at the same token you're helping out somebody else. Win-win. Maybe frustrations or difficulties, you're trying to get something done and you just can't figure it out. Put it out here. Maybe somebody has gone through the same thing or is about to. Let's join forces and try to get someplace there. So it's not supposed to be a one-way conversation. It's not your typical user group talk. It's really a conversation, so don't be shy. We do this every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time. Doing this on Skype, always the same link. So if you just bookmark this link, it's always the same link to join in the meeting. Feel free to share the link with friends, co-workers, people who you feel could be contributing to these conversations or benefiting from these conversations. So help us promote the cause here. Here's a partial list of things that we've covered, just to give you an idea that we are not like .NET centric or Java centric or JavaScript centric, or it's really whatever folks feel like talking. Maybe you're going through like the last sprint, you've been focused on helping the PO write user stories. Well, bring those experiences up. What are the challenges? What are the lessons learned there? Maybe you've just learned how to write your tests, your unit tests, and you've learned about arrange act assert. Bring it up. How's the experience coming along? What do you need help with? Whatever the case might be. We have a virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting, as well as link to the videos for the previous meetings with a little blurb about the things that we talked about in each one of those meetings, if you want to catch up and see what we've been up to. And other than that, let's get things rolling. Since I have the screen share here, let me pull up the Improving Virtual Events website. So we offer every Friday a free lunch and learn that people can just register for it and just join in every Friday. And John, who we have here on the call, will be giving the one in 2 weeks from now. Don't try this at home, kids. So John, would you like to talk a little bit about that presentation? What is it about?
So are y'all getting feedback?
I'm not.
Okay, good. For me, I volunteered to help solve a problem on an open source project. Friend of mine named Jeremy Miller has a project called Martin, which is a event sourcing database backed by Postgres. Really cool open source project. Anyway, there were some folks who were having trouble using it from F Sharp. It's a C Sharp library. And so I looked at the problem they were having. It's like, yeah, I bet I could help with that. And so, I volunteered to help and then realized that I was going to have to make .NET do some very strange things to achieve my goal. And so I'm not going to go in the whole project and, the whole solution and everything, but I ended up having to hijack typehub.
Okay.
So if you're a .NET developer, you know that typehub is just a little function that you hand in a system.type and it it gives you the type of that to use in your code. And Martin uses that to set up the types of the objects you're going to use for your events. So typically before you start a stream of events, you initialize and say, here's the type of. And for this, we had to make it think it was a different type than it really was. And so I learned how to use statically resolved type parameters, which is a feature of .NET I never thought I would use. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and I got into areas of things where, sometimes you just kind of go off the deep end and you realize there's no help here because you're not doing things the way you're supposed
to. Yes.
But anyway, I thought it'd be fun to talk about, some things that you wouldn't normally think about doing in .NET and things that I wouldn't necessarily suggest people do for, your average project. But it's kind of cool to know that you can do things like that. So anyway, that's what it's going to be talking about. That's what I'm going to be talking about.
Interesting.
I don't think I can give you any more details. I have to start the presentation.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's interesting. It does make me think of, I always draw the comparison, between programming languages and, spoken languages. Because once you've learned the first one, as soon as you start learning the second one, you're going to be drawing parallels to the first one, right? The thing that you know, and then that's where you build from there. So with a programming language, the same thing. So like everybody knows that I have a strong background with X-based languages from Clipper, FoxPro, those languages. So when I transitioned into C# and those languages, of course, I was as I always say, I was writing C# with a FoxPro accent, right? Because it's like, yeah, it compiles, right? The runtime is fine, but when I look at the code at the time, it's like, oh yeah, it looks like, FoxPro constructs. And I remember when I've worked on so many projects that were like FoxPro rewrites, right? So taking a FoxPro application, legacy, and then rewriting the whole thing in .NET. And there were so many cases where people are like, oh, isn't there like a tool that can make the whole process simpler? Because it's like, we have the code in FoxPro like this. Isn't there anything that we can just read that code and recreate it in C#? And it's like, no, that's not a possibility at all, because FoxPro, besides being object-oriented, it's also a dynamic language. So we were doing things in FoxPro that were impossible to do as is in C#. So we had to do like a lot of, at the time, like IL emit, which was nasty. Wow. It is nasty, right? Trying to reproduce some of that FoxPro way of doing things. And then when the dynamic feature came in C#4, that was like, oh, now I can do some of those things the way we did it in FoxPro, because it's like, we don't want to write the entire application dynamic. That's not the point, but there are certain extension points that the users need, that part is dynamic. We need to make it dynamic. Now we have a feature in C# that will allow us to do that. And then leveraging what I knew from my FoxPro back then, it made a lot of sense to do it that way. It was very powerful. So I wonder if that's somewhat what happened to you, like coming from a F# background and then trying to address things in the C# space, but from an F# background. Is there any of that in there?
Well, so for me, I started out back in the days of Visual Basic, which, by the way, if anybody's a VB6 fan, there's a Kickstarter to bring it back.
Oh my goodness.
So I will wish those folks good luck. And that's all I'll say about that. But anyway, I went from VB to C#, and, spent most of my career, doing C#. And then recently, the last few years, I started doing more and more F#. And there's enough overlap. They're both .NET languages, and you will see a lot of features. A lot of the newer features in C# are things that they've adapted that work really well in F#. And so some of that is starting to bleed over. The focus of F sharp is traditionally more functional, more like what you would do with Link than what you would do in a normal OO C sharp sort of thing. And so, you know, in this case, what I was working with is like there's this very well done C sharp library. I mean, I really do appreciate the quality of Martin, and I love event sourcing, so just waiting for the chance to be able to use it in a project. I mean, I'd love to. Um, but honestly, event sourcing fits pretty well with the way people who write in F sharp think. But this one thing was that in F sharp, there's something called discriminated unions that you don't have in C sharp. And I'm not going to go and try to explain them, but the thing about it is the way they're implemented in IL is that there's an abstract class that is actually the union, and the actual cases of the union are the concrete classes. And so, yeah, they're supposed to come in a future version for C sharp. But it basically is just a way of saying, like, easiest example I give people is payment types. Like, you have cash, you have credit, you have Bitcoin or whatever. And none of those things, it's not really an OO hierarchy. And normally in C sharp, I'd probably just, have an iPayment source interface or something, right? But with discriminated unions, it says, so this parameter can be one of these things, one of these possible things. Well, the way Martin was set up, it needed to have a concrete type. And so that was the problem that I was trying to solve, is that coming from a C sharp perspective, expecting me to pass you a concrete type as the type I'm going to use for my events is completely reasonable. That is exactly how you wouldn't expect anything else, right? It's just this weird little thing about. But if you come at it from an F sharp perspective, since typically what you have for a stream of events is a bunch of different things, right? Oh, so you can create an account, you can add money to an account, you can debit money from an account. And you almost always would describe something like that in F sharp as a discriminated union. So the natural way to use this library from F sharp just flat out doesn't work, right? And so there's that mismatch of these, two pretty closely related languages, right? That you kind of have to get over. So, it's really, it's one of those things that the thing that attracted me to F sharp is that the basic ways of dealing with the world map directly to the way I think of applications. And I think of applications as like, well, we've got a bunch of functions and we have these records, and to my mind, like, I'm old enough to remember the world when bureaucracies didn't run on computers, like when it was actual paper. And you can model that in F sharp really very straightforwardly. And I it's one of those things. It's like, I'm not one of these one language is better than another. Mm-hmm. I just feel like I'd express myself better in F sharp than in C sharp. And that's true for human languages as well. I've got my son living with me who's studying ancient Greek, and they have a lot more verb tenses than English does. And they can express some ideas very easily that are kind of hard to express in English, to be honest.
Yes.
I'm sure you're probably familiar with something a little bit like that, Claudio.
Absolutely. I like that you bring that up, because it's the way I relate to it is like I have a special distaste with a lot of my Brazilian countrymen, where they are incorporating English words in places where we've had Portuguese words for ages. It's like that's just part of the language that everybody grew up speaking. Why are we now replacing some of these words with their English equivalents. It makes no sense. It does make sense when, like, say that a new thing comes up in the US, so there's an English word for it, and we have no translation whatsoever in Portuguese yet or in other languages. Well, we're going to start by using the original word in the language. That's fine. Now, if I am in a circle of, say, Brazilians who also happen to speak English, right? I'm okay with dropping certain English words or little phrases if everybody in the room can understand, right? So, for example, a common construct in English is to say, oh, this is the best book ever. Well, now Brazilians are using ever or adding ever at the end of sentences, like Portuguese sentences, and then they're adding ever, which is like, for those who speak English, oh, I get what you're saying. You say the same thing to my mom, she's gonna go like, honey, what did he say? Right? It makes no sense. So how do I translate that into like programming languages? Sometimes there are folks who look at my way of writing unit tests in C#, they look at it and they say, oh, that looks like Ruby. Like, well, yes, yep, it does look like Ruby because that's a better way to use the language here for the intents that I have for it, which is to spec out behavior, right? At that moment, I couldn't care less, even if I tried, that I'm violating the C# design guidelines, right? Because I'm using the language here to describe behavior. When I go into the implementation, then I drop into C# only mode, right? So I always draw these comparisons. So whenever like I bring, like if I'm writing C# and I'm working in a team where nobody has any idea about like functional programming, for example. So they can use LINQ, but they think of LINQ as like a T-SQL equivalent. Like, well, that's one side of it, but it's not all of it. If you don't think about the functional aspect behind it, you're not leveraging the full power of C#, right? So what do? Well, I teach just as much C# or functional programming for those folks so that as a team, we can use those constructs in the project. Because if you only have, of course, like, well, I'm the only Brazilian in the team, I'm going to start like naming all my classes in Portuguese. That does not make sense to anybody else but me, right? So finding this common language, between members of the team, I think is crucial. Not just like programming language, but also spoken language.
Yeah, I worked with a guy one time who was he was of Chinese descent, but from Vietnam. So he spoke English, French, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And he would name his variables and in different languages, and it was so confusing.
Oh, wow.
You'd be going along, and suddenly there'd be these variables in French. And like, okay, wait a minute. Anthony, stop this.
Yes.
Because that doesn't help anybody. Because none of the rest of us speak French.
Oh, man. Yeah. And we don't even have to go too far. I remember years ago doing some consulting for a client up in Oregon, where I'm looking at their code base and there are things that are making my brain go like, this is not right, this is not right, this is not right. And it turned out that the spelling of certain words was the UK version, the British English, because a part of the remote team was from the UK. And I'm reading the code and that was like bugging me because like, oh, the guys are misspelling things. And it took me a while to realize, oh, it's the UK guys who wrote this thing. So it like going from that to like completely foreign words in code, that would drive me insane.
We did eventually make him stop, but he wasn't really doing it even on purpose. He thought of the word error as being spelled with an EU and
Gotcha. Such an interesting problem, like something that's common. Now I'm kind of like far detached from this issue from so many years living in the US, but even nowadays, Brazilian coders writing software in Brazil, when they name methods, for example, they will say something like get pedidos, get clientes, right? So they will name the method with the get word and then the Portuguese, whatever it is that we are getting. Just because if we were to stick to Portuguese only, it wouldn't flow as well, right? It would look weird. So now you have this hybrid, but it only makes sense because like programmers will only know at least that level of English, right? If you say get whatever, they know what you mean. So in that case, we are bastardizing the spoken language, but everybody within that context will understand what it means. Very interesting. Cool. Who else we have on the call that we've been just going off on these things? Hey guys, what's up?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes. How are you?
Sweet. I'm great. My name is Varun. I'm new to Coding for Coach, and just here to listen and just share if possible.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, here, I don't know if you got the beginning. Is it the first time you're joining in?
Yeah.
Excellent. So yeah, I mean, here we always make a point to say, don't feel like in order to share, you have to be a master at whatever it is that you're about to share. You may share your frustration. You may share your difficulties. Sometimes that's what I do. Is like, man, this thing here is kicking my behind. What can I do, guys? So feel free to share, whatever it is that you feel like, because we are here to just have conversations, interesting conversations about stuff. So what is it that you do mostly?
So I guess a little bit about me. I'll be going to medical school in probably the next year. And I've been coding just on the side. It's just been a side passion of mine. And one thing that I'm really involved in right now is I'm like working with an organization called Village Book Builders. And what we're doing is building sort of kind of what Coding Coach is, which is like a mentoring platform, but for facilities and for students like in elementary and middle school. So what we try to do, we're building a mentoring management solution for facilities, and we're trying to open source it. I guess we're running into a bit difficulty, just especially on the React side, and just seeing if anybody's interested and just yeah, to help out. And so I guess a couple things. We basically build libraries around the world at the nonprofit and provide continuous support. Um, and we are mentoring about 1,000 individuals or students in developing countries. And it changes every couple months, 6 months. And we've so far helped about 18,000 students. So yeah, and mostly we've been doing this using spreadsheets. And now it's come to the point where we've moved completely into a web application, and we're trying to expand the web application to include more features for different users and different types of mentoring. Yeah, and yeah, it's a process.
I love that. Is there a place we can go like online now to learn more about it or add the links to the meeting videos afterward? To help
Yeah,
it?
for sure. So it's you can go to the website villagebookbuilders.org, and then also just search up Village Book Builders on GitHub. Most of the tools that we're building are open source, and we're trying to get a lot of tools for other nonprofits, including ours. Because mentoring is really kind of like a universal thing. It's like academic coaching or tutoring. It's just human connections that we're trying to create and catalyzing relationships. And so like so there's a lot of different use cases for it, and there's a lot of interest. And yeah, I guess a couple things we're just running into is just making progress on refactoring the code base, so it's using the best open source practices on React. Like a lot of Redux that we were using was just hacked, and like now we're using more. proper way of doing it. Um, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at, I guess, in the last week. Um, and we would, I guess, from my end, I'm just interested to see like what are your thoughts on it? What if there's any open source developers interested in helping out, um, and different stuff like that.
Well, first of all, it's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. That is such a cool thing. I've had this nonprofit idea for over 10 years now, something that I really would like to put together, and I've never just made the time to do it because I would need more people to help in. It would be something similar to what you're involved with. So
Cool. What's the
really
idea?
um, so the main idea is the following: is how to offer help or offer something to people. So, for example, let's say that I'm gonna go to Europe and spend 10 days there, and I would like to spend one of those days just giving out to whoever I can. It's like, okay, folks, look, I'm gonna be in Spain, for example, for this one day, and here are the things that I'm good at or that I like sharing. For example, I play guitar, I can write music, I can write code, I can ride motorcycles, and I'm passionate about all those things. Is there like a user group that could leverage that? Is there like a get together from friends that could leverage somebody, playing a guitar on the side? Whatever the case might be, I just want to have that interaction with people. So I would like to have a website where people can register their areas of interest and availability, when they're going to be where, and then others who can like tap into that and say, oh yeah, I could totally leverage something like that. Or maybe somebody who's looking for something like, hey, I'm looking for somebody who can like teach kids how to get started coding, right? Whatever the case might be, and do that like matchmaking between people who want to offer something and people who would, could, benefit from that. So that's the main idea, right?
That's super cool.
Thank you.
That's yeah, and I think we're trying to head in that direction. It's just
Good.
we're limited by software right now. Um, yeah, so I guess yeah.
Interesting. And when you say you're limited by software, expand on that if you don't mind.
So there's only I guess so many mentoring relationships that we can manage at a time with the current software. And like it takes a certain amount of support staff that work 24/7 to manage a certain amount of people. And if we can increase the number of features and uh, then we can manage more people and do more of those mentoring relationships beyond just academic education, like skills based or doing social entrepreneurship, right? And different stuff like that. Uh, so that like we can't expand into those areas until like we have a system that can manage all of that. Because if I added, because right now there's more people using our physical libraries than our mentoring, because we just can't have more students in our programs. It's just we only have a limited amount of computers, and there's only so much that from an administrative point of view we can manage and maintain in high quality. So if we added a feature like a data dashboard to the portal and to understand who's attending, who's not attending, right? That saves a lot of time. There's different features that we've planned out and made a roadmap for, but we just need to build them out before we can scale.
I see. Okay, so when we help you guys promote this, like if we're trying to enlist some help, where should we point people to?
Uh, I would say I can drop my email if they're
Okay.
interested in helping out, and then I can set up a meeting with them and just talk to them further about the
Right.
specifics. Um, because there's different operations from like the IT ops to data science to front end or back end or server side, and everyone has different skills. And I would say we're a small and nimble team.
Right, yeah.
And uh, besides that, I would say just check out the website, check out
Okay.
videos if basically we're just accelerating learning around the world, in developing countries, building libraries and improving the delivery and access of education. Um, and if that mission resonates with you, reach out to us.
Yeah.
And yeah, and yeah, that's really cool that you have that nonprofit idea. I feel like there's a basic set of necessities that are met across the world right now, and like what you're describing, the mentoring, the learning is kind of like the next phase, what we could help the world with.
Yeah, because I always catch myself thinking about those things where at times people are not offering help because they play down what they know, what they can do. And if others know that that person know about those things and can do those things, you do that matchmaking. It's like, hey, don't play down what you know, because it's nature, human nature, right? When
Yeah.
we start doing something, oh my goodness, that's so hard to do, and then we get overwhelmed, and then eventually we learn, and then we spend like years learning that, and then when we get to a point where we actually really know the stuff, we actually play it down. Like, oh yeah, no, that's easy. Well, now it's easy that you know, right? But when you were getting started, it was not that easy. There are others going through that experience that you could, potentially help those folks also, ramp up. Um, so that's something, it's being at the back of my mind all the time, is something that would be cool. So I'm happy to establish this connection, to know that you are involved with something like this, because, there will be a time when I'm going to be making the time to look into, how do I do this? And then I'll poke you. It's like, hey, Varun, how do we do this? Now that you have all this experience. Like as far as yeah, got the link. Thank you. I
Yeah.
know that at Improving we have many great React developers, and every once in a while I hear some improvers say, "Hey, do we have any projects that we could like practice things on, or that we could help with like refactoring or establishing best practices and things like that?" So this would be a good meaningful project to help with. I know that we have at least one improver helping some students with at the University of Houston, U of H, in
Cool.
similar project, right? Applying some like mentorship, helping them like, okay, this is what you're learning at school. Let's give you some, like real world experience, right? What does it look like here in real life? So we do have some experience with that. So let me see if I can make some connections there, and maybe something can come out of it. Some sort of help can come out of it.
Yeah, that would be great. And personally, I would love to connect with you on a one-to-one basis later, if possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's stay connected. I'm easy to find. I can hide. There are not that many Claudio Lasalas in the world. I only know myself, and it's not because I'm that special. It's just because there are a few Lasalas out there, and Claudio Lasala is. I haven't found another one. So
Yeah, and I'm just letting everyone know. I know very little coding. I'm just here to help do some of the administrative work and get everyone together. But the real coders, it's a team. Like it's a headless team. So that's the
let
really
me
cool
tell
part.
you, Aaron, do not play that role down. You can kick a tree, and a lot of programmers, coders, developers are going to fall off that tree. The one person who's going to glue it all together, those are, few and far, in between. So don't play down the role that you're playing, right? Because I know there are a lot of great, amazing developers out there who are lacking direction. They are lacking, okay, this is where you should put your knowledge and skills, is working on this kind of, because like if we are writing software and we are not empowering people, if we're not solving real people's problems, we are just writing code because it's fun, well, maybe we should be doing something else, right? Because this is not just for play, it's to bring something into this world. Not, that's just so deep. I'm feeling so hippie today.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad you share that view. I guess I'm just setting the bar lower so I can impress people later.
There you go.
I'm just joking. But yeah, yeah, and besides that, I guess so do you guys have any suggestions on I'm just I guess like the virtual brown bag like any like if you guys can check out the code base, any suggestions on what directions we should head or anything you guys see or any questions? Just curious. I'm just I guess I'm here to learn too. So
We all are. So yeah, I'll shut up now. Let the other guys talk a little bit too. So the other folks on the call, please open up your mics and just pitch in.
So I'll say one thing. I'm not a very good React developer, but I know a few, and I'll let them know about this. Um, I would also say the most important thing from your perspective is to make sure you have a very clear roadmap of where you want to go. Um, in my experience, developers can sometimes kind of go off on the things they want to do. Um, However, if you funnel them towards the things your organization really needs, you can, get a lot more out of that. So a little bit of free
gotcha.
advice. Make sure when people show up to volunteer, you have something for them to do, and pretty clear direction of what you want them to do. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I so much share that point of view where, you know, a lot of the developers, I mean, myself, my past self included, where, I just wanted to play with the shiniest toys, whatever new version of the framework or whatever new version of the language, that was fun. That was past me. Nowadays, that does not float my boat anymore. I'm more like, I want to see, you know, people smiling and people feeling empowered that their lives are getting better through the software that I'm helping to build. um, that's extremely important. As far as like React, for example, if we're gonna like zoom in into React, like I'm not a big React person either. I've worked on some React projects. I'd say that my skill is to look at code and say, okay, that does not feel right. Like I don't know a whole lot about this React thing, but that does not look good, right? And at times, and I always bring up this case where when I first start working in a React project, I would see some of the existing code and ask the other guys who were really good at React, and I would say, hey, is that the proper way to do it? Because it does not look good. Like from my experience from other languages, from other frameworks, from other tech stacks, that it smells fishy to me. Now, and then my point would be, we are either using the wrong framework or library, or we are using it wrong, right? We're making the improper use of it. I want to know which one is it, because sometimes you do use frameworks or libraries or languages in the not the best way possible, right? Or sometimes it's just that's just how the framework works, or that's just how the library works. There's not so much we can do about it. So I look at those things. So as it turned out, after like several months of asking React developers, is that the best way to do it? Is that the best way to do it? Eventually, I learned that a lot of them, and this is typical of a lot of developers, we learn how to do something here through like a hello world type of application sample project, or like a, learn React in 21 days type of book. We learn that, and then we keep doing those same things over the course of many years. We never evolve out of that. And that was the case when I started like poking React developers. They learned how to do something in React, and they kept doing the same thing for like 2 years without evolving out of that. And then I say, okay, from my previous experience, yes, that's how I would start when I'm first learning a new tech stack. I'm gonna just get stuff done. I don't know the best way to do it. I'm just trying to learn the minimal way to do it. right? But you have to always keep going back and say, okay, how can I make this better? How can I make this better? How can I make this better? So, going back to my initial point, I can look at React code and say, okay, from my experience, that does not look great. There's got to be a better way to do it. And sometimes, like it just happened recently. My current project is using Angular. I'm not a huge Angular guy either. I haven't done a whole lot with Angular, but I have done a whole lot with like C Sharp and other languages, Ruby. So I looked at some Angular code and I said, man, that looks like a lot of code to do this thing. It's like that cannot be right. I see that it's getting the job done. It's passing the automated tests. It gives me the feature. But looking at the code, it does not sit right with me. What can I do about it? Well, since we had a bunch of a bunch of automated tests, I just dove in and started making changes to the Angular code. It's like, okay, if this was in C Sharp, this is how I would approach this. Let's see how far I can go. And then, I try one thing, I try another thing. It's like, well, yeah, it worked in C Sharp that way, but it doesn't work in Angular the same way. Well, how would I do that in Angular? Do some research, and then eventually I find something where it's like, okay, I like this code now. It looks a lot better. Now let me show this to the Angular developer and say, hey, what do you think of this? Does it make sense to you, right? And at times what I get is, how did you arrive at that conclusion? I never thought of doing that in Angular, right? And that's how we build things together, because like now I have somebody who knows a lot of Angular, but didn't think the same way, didn't do the problem solving the same way. And that's where I always do this comparison between like spoken languages, right? Because if I'm thinking in English, my problem solving goes one way. If I'm thinking in Portuguese, my problem solving goes another way. Not the best or the right or wrong, it's just a different way. And sometimes I do want to see this different way applied here to see what comes out of it. And sometimes what comes out of it, it's pretty good.
Sweet.
If that makes any sense.
No, it definitely does. And it kind of goes into like a problem I guess we're facing right now is just with a lot of React developers that join the team, they're, trying to learn at the same time, contribute. And so I guess the code base is at a state right now that it's very hard for new developers to contribute if they don't know the best practices. So then, like, I guess the question is, do we have them just hack something up initially and then do a bunch of code reviews? Or do we continue training them before they can contribute to the code base? So let's just say, let's make it more tangible for a feature. Let's say we're creating a donate button and different donate options.
So here's this is something I share with everybody as a previous experience I've had when I've gone from the .NET space to Ruby on Rails. That was 10 years ago now, a little over that. So I'm coming to Ruby on Rails after like 15 years or so of .NET. So as I mentioned, I was writing Ruby with a C# accent, right? Because I was writing Ruby, it was compiling, it was doing the thing, but it looked like C# code because that's my frame of reference at the time. The approach that I took there, and I started taking that approach whenever I have to jump into a new, tech stack, I first learned how to write automated tests for the new thing. So I went to Ruby, the first question I asked was, how do I write unit tests in Ruby? Let me start there, because then it decreases the number of things that I need to learn, because I just have to learn as much Ruby necessary to write a unit test, right? So let me start there, because once I wrote the test, I can go ahead and implement the feature. However, I can do it, which would be like this totally non-Ruby-like way of doing it. But it's passing the test. Once I got to a point where I got the code, it's passing the test, the code looks nasty because that's just how I know how to do it. get with a mentor and say, here, I have the passing test. How do I make this better? And then have that mentorship work that way. So that's what I was doing. I would write my Ruby code, very nasty. I would get, a mentor who knew proper Ruby, and they would say, okay, this is how we would do it in Ruby. This is how we would do it. This is how we would do it. And not just this is how, but why we would do it that way in Ruby, right? Why does it make more sense to do it that way in Ruby, right? So that's an approach that has worked really well for me in the past. And still does. Like I said, when I first jumped into React, how do I write tests for these components? Show me that, right? And that's where a lot of folks stumbled, because the way that some devs were writing tests for components in React, oh my goodness, I'm like, this is making my eyes bleed. So then I first showed them how to write better tests, right? So we improved their test experience, and then we flipped, okay, now let's look at how to write the component code for React and take it from there. Does that make sense? Does that give you something?
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Very cool.
Wow, I wish I met you a year ago.
That's it, there's always the proper time, the proper space and situation, and proper people. It's now, right? Whatever is happening right now is what should happen anyways.
Sweet, yeah. And just letting you guys know from our tech stack, we do have the product roadmaps. They're pretty fairly detailed. I would say very functionally based. We do wireframes. On I'm currently using a lot more Whimsical than Figma nowadays. And then in terms of React, we're kind of using AntDesign as our main design library. We kind of have a different brand strategy going, so we have different styles and components. We're using kind of the less framework, and we're running React with Redux on the Krakow, so it just gives us more libraries to use. On the back end, we're just using Python, Django, REST framework, and we're running this on Oracle servers because Oracle just provided us a really nice grant. So that's kind of the tech stack, and if anybody has any skills alongside those, that'd be great. And I will tell you, I don't like the Oracle servers too much at the moment because it doesn't allow me to run array lists. So so we might switch out of it.
Interesting. I have zero experience on that tech stack on the back end. Yeah, like backend stuff for me has been for the last 2 decades either .NET stack or Rails. So
yeah,
but yeah, good stuff. This is pretty cool. Yeah, I took note. I mean, I really like what you're doing there, and knowing that like you have wireframes for things like that. Trying to do it properly. I love that because like I have a couple of like side projects, things that I do on my personal time, and I go through the same motion. Like I'm big into motorcycle riding at like race tracks and all that. So I always tell people, that's an expensive sport, right? It is expensive. So I want to make sure that I know how I'm using my budget so that I can get to do more of it, right? Because I love it. I want to do more, and I know it's expensive. So I want to optimize, how I'm going about it. So first year when I first got started, yes, I had like spreadsheets to just keep track of everything. Where's my money going? And then the second year, I'm like, you know what? I should probably write a system for it. I should write software. Right? That's what I do for a living. But what do I do? Instead of starting like just to crank code, I'm actually writing user stories. I'm doing the story mapping. I'm like sketching out some mock-ups for the general idea so that I know where I'm going with those things. That's the proper way to do it for sure, as opposed to, oh, let me just start writing code.
Sweet.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
So
What is
yeah,
it
and
that
like,
we are seeing here? I'm seeing a
oh,
screen share.
yeah, I guess I was just showing you some training and resources that we've made, at
Ah,
least for the front end React stuff. Like we just have different stuff going on, but one of the big things that I guess one thing I'm working on right now is uh, for new developers, like we usually try to get them to go on a course um, to learn React before they can start contributing to the code base. And I was just wondering, do you guys have any course suggestions or YouTube series? Like, there's at least for the backend, there's I found a really nice course on Django and REST framework. But for the front end, I don't know enough React yet to know which course is the best. At least for me, I just been Googling stuff and just using the React documentation
okay.
on the reactjs.org page. But any tips or training resources that I should give some of the new developers?
Uh, let's see. I know that when I was getting started with React, I was looking at the Pluralsight courses that they had there. Those were pretty good. And
The which ones?
the ones on a Pluralsight. You're familiar with
Okay.
the Pluralsight?
No, yeah, I haven't seen that.
Really? Oh, you're in for a treat then, because they have some really good content out there.
They
Okay,
have the free month of April right now.
What was that, John?
Pluralsight does their free month in April. So
Oh,
you should definitely go there and check it out right now because you could at least you got 2 more weeks of being able to get their stuff for free.
sweet. How do you spell it out? Could you guys send me the link?
I'll put it in the
Yeah.
chat.
there you go. Yeah, so they have some really good courses on React, Redux, all that stuff. I'm trying to find, I know that in our improving events, we've had at least 2 talks around React. That's not like a full-blown course. They are like 1-hour talks.
Yeah.
I'll find the links and drop it in the chat. One of our guys, Eric Zibanek, he is really good. He's one of the best React developers that I know. And he
Cool.
had one talk specifically about React. And he's very opinionated on how, React projects should get started and stuff like that, because it's essentially, and he has a great point. Like, if you learn React to walkthroughs that you find on the internet, you're finding like the quick and easy way to get started. But once you get serious about it, those things can actually haunt you later, because it makes it very hard to get rid of the automatic stuff that you got getting started that way. So Eric actually shares, these are the things that you probably shouldn't do, right? You should be conscious and aware of those. So that's one good talk. And he had another one maybe 2 weeks ago. Again, I'll find the link and post it, where he talks about state management, right? So not necessarily just to Redux. It can be any, like if you use Redux, Akita, or any other ones. It's like, how do you think from an architectural standpoint, right? How do you use your local states and, things like that? Really good talk. So I'll look at that link and send it to you.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I
Excellent.
guess one diagram that I've been using to kind of describe state management, or I would say it's one of what another developer was working on, is kind of this. And we just have a couple notes on how to use state management. And we're sort of, I guess, building up training guides as we see issues popping up.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
This is great stuff, man.
It's apparently this is like a holy diagram, and a lot of people find it really useful.
Right. I'm a visual guy. I do like seeing images, for things. It can be like written at the back of a napkin. I don't care, but something that I want to paint that image in my mind, right?
Yeah.
That's it's so helpful. At least to me, that's very helpful. I'm actually posting it in the chat window. I just found that one link to that one video I just mentioned.
Sweet.
Yeah, front-end state management.
Gotcha.
Definitely check it out.
Okay, will do.
Right. Good deal. And yeah, as you go through that content, if you have questions or anything, then I can just, connect you to Eric. He's passionate about this kind of stuff, so I'm pretty sure he could, help out however he can as well.
Yeah, for sure. And just letting you know, like one thing we've been trying to do is trying to build this open source. So that way, not just like our nonprofit, but other nonprofits could use it as well. So I know the guy you were talking about in Houston, if they want to just collaborate and merge the repos, we're perfectly fine doing that. Or even with Coding Coach, when we get to a certain point, we could integrate the repos. And that's something we're, I guess, looking forward to, and like allowing other nonprofits to, like, I guess everyone to start using like one universal mentoring platform.
Mm.
But we'll see where we can get there. That's going to take a year or two. But, yeah. So if you have anybody who's interested in working with us towards that direction, that would be really cool.
Sounds good. Will do. Yeah, and just posted I found Eric's link to the intro to React, so it could be a good talk, because again, it's slightly different than your normal, hello world type of, walkthrough. Right?
Yeah.
It's more from, okay, in the real world, these are the things that we normally do when we're, working on a React project. So
Nice. Thank you.
not a problem.
And just curious, I guess, John, curious to learn more about you.
Oh, well, I don't know that I have enough time to talk about me, but there's one stupid thing I want to talk about. Okay. So I'm going to show y'all my screen and tell you a little story. I did something with stupid font tricks. Okay. So can you see that? So in most programming languages, right? You make variable names and, you have to run them all together. You can't put spaces in them.
Wait, are you
If
sharing your screen? I cannot see it.
Oh, it should be my video. I'm doing it through OBS. Do
Mm,
it. Look at speaker mode.
I can see part of your screen.
oh,
Like,
so yeah, speaker view. I can try that. No, speaker view does not do that. Huh.
Oh well. So here's
Oh,
what I
here we
did.
go. Okay, now I can see it.
You see it? Okay. So in F sharp, you could put spaces in your variable names if you surround it in backticks. The two backticks. Well, I thought it would be really cool to make a font that had a ligature for two backticks that made them almost disappear. So, see, there's a backtick, but if you have two of them, they almost disappear.
Huh.
And then you can put spaces in your variable names. Right?
Okay.
Then you put the other two. But the backticks aren't really obvious. So I'm going to start writing code that looks like a newspaper article. This is completely the stupidest thing ever. I agree. But it's been something that's been bugging me for years. I was like, one of these days, I'm going to install FontForge and actually get it working and take a open source font and do a ligature. And I figured out how to do it one Saturday afternoon when I was bored out of my mind. So now you know something about me, which is I'm a little obsessive about certain things, and I'll go to a lot of trouble for the nuttiest things. But anyway. So yeah, I now have a font that I can use all my fancy variable names with spaces in them and it not be so obvious.
I dig it. Maybe next time you're gonna have to show us how to do that, because
Yeah, it's actually kind of fun, but yeah. So it's usually better just, start with one of those fonts that already has a bunch of ligatures in it, programming fonts like, Fira Code or Mono. There's a bunch of them that have, the different ligatures in them. And then, there's FontForge has a nice little tutorial on how to do fonts. how to make ligatures and things. But yeah, it's actually after 1 and I got to go, but
Absolutely. Yeah,
this was
same here.
fun. Nice to hear about Village Book Builders. That was cool.
It was indeed. Yeah, well, thanks everybody for joining in. We are just a little bit over our time box, but we get to do this again next week. So hope to see you all back. You guys enjoy the rest of the day and have a great weekend. See you all.